you go, why are you so stupid? But then there's other things that deal with the way he sets up the themes of the story of Anakin Skywalker's downfall that are so good that you go, I'm willing to forgive him all this dumb junk, even though there's a lot of dumb sci-fi junk in it. But there's also a lot of really great stuff in it. And I think that's why they endure, and that's why they have that, why people are so passionate about them. Because some people focus on, and I realize this, especially the prequel versus sequel fight, is the people who love 5, 6, or 6, 7, and 8, they focus on all the good stuff and they ignore all the junk.
It's 4, 5, 6.
I'm sorry.
I can't believe you.
What did I say?
Then shifted to 6, 7, 8. Like you were about to be wrong twice. 4, 5.
Yeah. The people who love 4, 5, 6, what they really just love is 5, and then they it's like people who say, "Oh, SNL used to be good in this decade," and then they run the highlight reel in their mind of all the best stuff, and they ignore all the junk.
Yeah.
And then the people who love the prequels do the same thing, where they go, they talk about the way he deals with the themes and the motifs and the story of the downfall of Anakin, and the sort of allusions to Nazi Germany and to the fall of the Roman Republic and all this, but then they ignore all the junk. So it's like it's almost like all of those movies, if they had him there and then you brought in maybe like another person to edit them and clean them up, I think they could have been something more better than what they were. But I still think
the opinion I'm about to offer is not necessarily mine. I mean, I agree with it, but I did not think of it. It's the consensus. But a lot of people will say what I'm about to say as if they had thought of it independently, and they'll feel really smart. But luckily, I already know that I'm smart, so I don't need to lie. I'll just say I heard this from somewhere else, which is that George Lucas is a good story writer, but a terrible character and dialogue writer. And so everybody likes the broad themes of Star Wars, the beats, the pacing are all great, but the lines, people like Jar Jar, all these elements are just goofy and kind of dumb because Lucas is just that's not where his strength lies.
I could see that, although I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't necessarily agree that he's bad at writing dialogue and characters. I do agree that he does not write dialogue and characters that we like, but I think when you look at his influences and what he's trying to do, I think that he's trying to write. I think that to him, those are what the characters are supposed to sound like, because they're sort of these like comic book serial type characters. Yes. They talk in this comic book-esque way of like, I am angry, I am this, I am telling you how I feel. It's stupid, but that's one of those things where it's like, I saw somewhere somebody was talking about movie reviews, and I think it was John Lovitz, said that people gave the movie The Benchwarmers bad reviews because they said it was stupid and childish. And he was like, it's supposed to be stupid and childish. It's for stupid children. It's a child's movie that's supposed to be goofy and silly. And sometimes you have to judge a movie by its own merits of like, does it do what the director is trying to do? And then is what the director is trying to do worth doing? And I think George Lucas does what he's trying to do, but sometimes his choices are not what we want them to be. So I think the problem with George Lucas is not his skill. I think it's that the movies he wants to make are not the movies we want him to make or other people want to make. And I heard this commentary about it was a very small inkling of George Lucas's, what he has publicly said his ideas would have been for the new trilogy that they just made if he had made it and if he hadn't sold it to Disney. And it was literally all this stuff about how like midichlorians are like, it was kind of almost like how there's like a, if I'm remembering.
Okay, I gotta stop you. Midichlorians.
No, it's midichlorians. I'm definitely right about that.
No, mitochondria.
I knew he would correct me. He would correct me. But anyway, midichlorians are sort of having a subterraneous like battle amongst themselves in which the human beings and all these things that exist in the world that we know of Star Wars are just vehicles for them to like do what they're trying to do. And it was this thing that sounded like schizophrenic, like batshit crazy, insane things. And then I heard an explanation of it and I went, I gotta say, it's more interesting than what Disney came up with, even though I think everyone would hate it. But I went, you know what? I'd go see it. And
this was a character philosophy in Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic 2. This game is like 20 years old, so I'm not gonna care about spoiling it. The villain of it, Darth Traya, she comes to believe that the Force itself is evil, because in its efforts to rebalance itself, it kills millions just to get some idea of an equilibrium. And so she wants to remove the Force entirely from the galaxy. And you got to stop her. Spoiler alert, she's defeated. So this was a bit of a media digression in our Democrat section. So where do we get? So I was saying COVID, right? People using $10 words, George Orwell, Grand Moff Tarkin, Star Wars. So then, yeah, Tarkin is my favorite. Okay, here's the quote from George Orwell. This is from Politics in the English Language. When one watches some tired hack on the platform mechanically repeating the familiar phrases, bestial atrocities, iron heel, blood-stained tyranny, free peoples of the world, stand shoulder to shoulder, one often has the curious feeling that one is not watching a live human being, but some kind of dummy. A feeling which suddenly becomes stronger at moments when the light catches the speaker's spectacles and turns them into blank discs which seem to have no eyes behind them. And this is not altogether
anime
fanciful.
Glasses.
A speaker who uses that kind of phraseology has gone some distance into turning himself into a machine. The appropriate noises are coming out of his larynx, but his brain is not involved, as it would be if he were choosing his words for himself. If the speech he is making is one that he is accustomed to make over and over again, he may be almost unconscious of what he is saying, as one is when one is uttering the responses in church. And this reduced state of consciousness, if not indispensable, is at any rate favorable to political conformity. If you simplify your English, you are freed from the worst follies of orthodoxy. You cannot speak any of the necessary dialects, and when you make a stupid remark, its stupidity will be obvious, even to yourself. George Orwell, Politics in the English Language. You should all read it and check it out. Now, he was giving this as writing advice, but I think it's best to just give it also as speaking advice, too.
This is the same thing that Dostoevsky talks about when he talks about being possessed by ideology. It's not the same thing, but it's similar. It's you become a vessel for these ideas that are not your own. Jordan Peterson talks about that a lot. The person becomes, they're not like really, like he said, they're not a person. They're just a machine that is, to get back to the midichlorian thing, they just become a vehicle for these other forces. You would argue what those other forces are. You would say that they're just bad ideas. Some might say that they're actual literal manifestations of evil.
Yeah, I sometimes get accused of when I'm arguing with people, I sometimes get accused of just waiting to utter my response, which really is a charge. I mean, I've heard it less and less lately as I've just gotten older. Maybe I've become a better person, but other people, I mean, they do it way more because at least when I utter a response, it's a response like I've thought of and I'm now waiting to say it. Other people seemingly are just uttering responses to keywords that they had pre-programmed before the conversation even began. And you can tell just from the frequency of how often I need to be told, Marcel, listen to what you're saying, versus how often I get to tell people think about what you're saying relative to what I just said, right? They'll say phrases that have, in many cases, no connection. They don't really make sense. And I'll say, try to visualize what you just said. And actually, George Orwell gives this kind of as advice of, try to actually draw a visual from what you're saying. Because people will just say, but when they discuss theories of justice or, capitalism and racism. Here, that's an easy peasy one, right? People say capitalism is inherently racist. And then I say, okay, but we observe the fact that, most immigrants that come to a country are usually encouraged to come there by capitalists. Most non-Germanic whites that are in the United States today, right? Irish people like you or all the Eastern Europeans were brought here by people who own mines and such, right? They came for employment and usually they had a job lined up ready for them. So it seems a little weird to say that capitalists like homogeneity. It kind of seems like they just want to pull a word from somewhere ever, right? But then they'll just repeat this capitalist racing, okay, I want you to even I want you to paint the image for me, paint the picture for me, because I'm not seeing it, but I want you to describe in the language of human action, right? What are these racist corporations? Where are these racist corporations? What is happening? Because you're just repeating slogans, right? I give my defense of capitalism, and you're like, but that's racist, or that leads to slavery. And then again, I say, okay, let's think about this for a second. do you associate the North with capitalism and like the excesses of capitalism, or the South? And most sane people would say, surely when I think of hyper-capitalism, I think of New York and Chicago and not, Atlanta or Raleigh. And say, okay, so it sure seems like the Northern Army, the super capitalist one, I think we all basically agree was the less racist army here, right? Think about what you're saying. Really walk it through your own head of what you're saying, right? And a lot of people seem to be incapable of this. They just repeat these slogans, they repeat these phrases. Monument to democracy. Like, what does that even mean? Yeah, just me personally railing against people who say bad things.
But Marcel, what about black on black crime?
Yeah, that's enough of me complaining my personal issues. Well, see, my personal issues, I turn into other people's issues. So it's every point that everybody gets this glimpse into my psyche. I guess moving forward. So Biden got inaugurated. Now, we talked about it last episode, which was No, we recorded the episode before the inauguration, I remember. That's why I'm looking at the date the episode was published in February. Like, did we talk about it last time? I guess we didn't.
No, it took like a month to get that one out.
Yeah, I'm not sorry. So Biden's been inaugurated. He's president now, but at the same time, it kind of feels like he's always been president. I don't feel like Trump was president. It feels not real. Partially because he doesn't, Trump can't talk to anybody. He's got a technological muzzle. Yeah, he just vanished on the face of the earth. And at a certain point, I see now what how it must have been like. This is just like 1984, right? Where the past in its way has been changed, but it just speaks to the level of which Trump did nothing for his supporters or fulfilled any of his promises. We were promised a wall. We were promised, pulling out of wars. We were promised right-wing death squads to arrest Hillary Clinton and Ellen DeGeneres and Tom Hanks and such. We didn't get any of those things. And so all we have is just a crazy year left. And a lot of us are banned from most social media.
Can I just say, though, like, to all the people, and I know people like this, who are like, I just want Trump out of there because then these people will stop their bitching and moaning and they'll just leave us alone. I always knew that was never going to happen. And I understood why people wanted to believe that, because it was like, there's riots and this and that. And to some extent, that has happened. Like, there's less riots.
The riots stopped. I mean, that's true.
Because they were being directed and as part of a shadowy campaign or whatever. And I get that, but at the same time, like the idea that, all these people, they'll just kind of calm down. No, they're not going to calm down. They're just going to get worse and worse. There's no undoing this and going back. Like, I saw someone said the other day, I think they were talking about COVID though, and they said there's not going to be any when all this is over, you stupid slut. And I felt like that about, like, when I would talk to people who would basically say, like, ever since Trump, it seems like all these left-wingers have gone nuts, and I can't wait until, like, as much as I might like Trump or I think he's funny or whatever, I just want things to go back to normal. It's like, that's not how this works. They don't just go back to normal.
Even the more cynical of us thought that, when COVID was first happening and it said 2 weeks to flatten the curve, all of us who knew that was bullshit, which at the time was only 20% of people probably, said like, this is going to last for a while. And then once it reached like May, I think all of us knew like, okay, this isn't going to stop until like Trump is out of office. And so some of us thought, okay, it'll end after the election. And then some of us said, no, the inauguration, right? They're going to drag this out until Biden's inaugurated. And then like a month later, COVID will have just been vanquished.
Yep.
But we're now 2 months after Biden is inaugurated.
And there's not even a hint that they're planning on anything like this.
Exactly.
What's going to happen, if it happens at all, it'll be because of what's going on in these states that are opening. Which is that enough states will do it where it'll just become this thing where only the Democrat states aren't doing it. And they're eventually going to have to go, okay, we can't do this. We're just dying. But at the same time, I could also picture.
No, don't even enable that.
Constantly.
Don't enable that. Democrats don't respond to simple.
You're
things.
Right. No, that's why I was cutting off my own point, because they don't do that with minimum wage or anything else. So what's going to happen is those states will just continue to die, and they'll just be like, half the country's on lockdown and half the country's in a normal situation, and the Democrats and the Washington will just keep bailing out all the blue states that are just dying.
Yeah.